Oh, what's up, Seven Spice? How you doing? Good morning. Alright, pull up the screen for you. I muted myself by accident. There you go. And we are on the last 3 episodes. So an hour watching this, so I start showing early, and then I can get straight to the gameplay of Sarah is missing. I've muted right now, so I can't hear it.
Annihilate. Well, loyal theorists, this is it. This will be
We are
my final FNAF theory, and this time I mean it.
What time is it here?
The end is nearly at hand. The pieces are in place for you. You missed it last week. Look for the green. And remember everything I taught you. Remember, dates are important. Remember the... Hurry, time is running out.
Hello, Internet! Welcome to Game Theory, the show that, by my count, has had no less than 10 final FNAF theories. At this point, it's practically become its own meme, but this time, it's no joke. After 66 theories,
yes, it is, because there's
and
one more after this.
Exotic butters. Make that 2 bangin' remixes?
There's one. Wait, I thought it was, I was thinking about this one. This is the last one.
Today, I end my coverage of Five Nights at Freddy's.
That sounds
After
nice.
this, there's only one final game theory, and then the curtain closes on my time as host, and Tom will have to step into the spotlight. Hope you're ready for the challenge there, Tom. Tom?
Toy Bunny, Easter Bunny, Chocolate Bunny, Melted Chocolate Bunny, Withered Bunny, Blackheart Bunny, Rockstar Bunny, Glam Rock Bunny, Sunken Toy Bunny, Bonbon, Just Bon, System Error Bunny, Nightmare Bunny.
Well done, but how many toes does he have?
2? No, 3. 5?
Again. The first step of FNAF theorizing. Slowly losing your mind. I think he's gonna do just fine. You know, I did consider making my final theory about FNAF, but I actually have something really special planned for that one. So special, in fact, that we're gonna be doing a premiere for it on this channel next Saturday. But it also doesn't feel like that much was changed post Ruin and Help Wanted 2 from what we did at the end of last year. So I didn't really want to be redundant either. You can see the struggle that I was facing, right? This episode, it's a big deal to me. It is literally the end of my legacy with FNAF. And you see, that's when it hit me. Legacy. Typically, FNAF theories are born out of the small details, but what if I took a step back and looked at the big picture? What if instead of counting animatronic toes or dead kids, I took a meta approach and just looked at the entire legacy of FNAF? I'm sure we're all familiar with the butterfly effect, right? The idea that a butterfly flapping its wings could cause the smallest of changes in the air, which could potentially lead to a tornado forming. Well, the term actually comes from the research of meteorologist Edward Lorenz, who, back in 1963, decided to round some numbers in his data. He condensed one variable from 0.506127 to just 0.506. And yet, that tiny change right there completely threw off his computer's weather models, transforming sunny skies into violent storms, hence the whole tornado thing. This realization that small changes in data could yield such tremendously different results ultimately threw off science's entire understanding of nature. Before Lorenz, people thought that the universe could ultimately be predicted. Sir Isaac Newton back in 1687 famously believed in the clockwork universe, the idea that the parts of the universe worked like a machine, and that eventually if you understood how the parts worked, you could predict practically anything. French mathematician Pierre-Simon Laplace actually said basically the same thing. Eventually we would get to a place where nothing would be uncertain. And yet Lorenz showed us that one small change, one minor mistake or estimate or imprecise measurement in a complex system could have a domino effect at a massive scale, resulting in changes that you would never see coming. For example, in 1928, Alexander Fleming discovered that there was mold in his petri dish, but rather than just throwing it away or cleaning it up, he decided to study it, which then led to the discovery of penicillin, a life-saving antibiotic that could be used to treat meningitis, pneumonia, gonorrhea, syphilis, blood poisoning, and many others. Or if you want another example, you have the explosion of hip-hop music largely owing its origins to a random lightning strike in New York City. In 1977, a bolt of lightning put the the city of New York into a 25-hour blackout. So what do you do for all that time that you're stuck in the dark? You loot and pillage, baby. New Yorkers started to ransack storefronts, including music shops full of instruments and supplies. Suddenly, expensive DJ equipment was in the hands of young aspiring musicians eager to experiment with hip-hop, which was a new genre of music just hitting the local scene. And thus, hip-hop was truly able to thrive. History is full of these sorts of stories, from the foundations of medicine and music to even stuff as extreme as the origins of both World War I and II. Why do I bring all this serious stuff up in relation to Spooky Bear Game? Because FNAF is one of those rounded variables. One decision by Scott Cawthon reshaped gaming and YouTube and the entire entertainment world as we know it. And that's not an exaggeration for effect. One man's decision to not give up, to try again in the face of rejection and adversity, literally shifted billions of dollars of the economy and affected hundreds of millions of lives in ways that are incalculable. And that is what I wanted to call attention to in my final FNAF theory. FNAF shows us that by not giving up, one person can have a profound effect on the course of history itself. I feel like the origin story of FNAF's been talked about to death, but just to set the stage here, despite hitting it big with FNAF in 2014, its creator Scott Cawthon had been making games at that point for 20 years, since 1994. And yet, even in those earliest days, you can tell that Scott had a fascination with creepy robots, working their designs into projects like the sci-fi Ifer Moon and the religious Pilgrim's Progress. Even this incredibly rudimentary RPG Legacy of Flan has a final boss that has what looks to be the first appearance of what would eventually evolve into the Mangle. But despite producing a lot of games, none really ever caught the public's eye. And then came Chipper & Sons Lumber Company, where initial reviews, what few there were rough. And as the story goes, it was the reaction to James Stephanie Sterling that would change the course of Cawthon's career forever. Thank God for her.
It's just all over the place, and that thing looks like it's gonna kill your children. I imagine the phrase, "kill me," is stated over and over again in the world of Chipper and Sons. Oh, they're robot beavers. That's not good. I think he's the only living thing in this world.
This repeated criticism, plus the lack of financial stability, brought Scott down to his lowest. Ready to quit games, he decided to try one final time and lean into the thing that had been leveled at him time and time again, the creepy robotic animations. And thus, Five Nights at Freddy's was born. And that right there, that's gonna act as our nexus point. The one flap of a butterfly wing. The decision to make a final game instead of just giving up. Now, let's see how it all maps out from there. Let's start with just the obvious downstream effects of this. That one game, over the course of the last decade, has spun off into 12, which honestly, I've never truly sat down and processed. But believe it or not, there are 12 of these things, depending on how you count them. The entire franchise has sold 9.9 million copies on Steam alone, which in total has an estimated revenue of $94 million. And that's not even including
from broke to millionaire.
The console and mobile ports, or the number of microtransactions for FNAF AR, which itself had over 40 million downloads. It's also worth pointing out that of the $94 million, 55 million of that was just from Steam sales of Security Breach, because that was actually at full price as opposed to all the others, which were either free or a couple of bucks. And while the first 4 FNAF games were entirely a one-man job, the rest have included voice actors, composers, entirely separate game studios like Steel Wool and Illumix. Even to this day, we're seeing this
I need to make a popular game.
continue with studios like
I need
MegaCat,
the
who
money.
up until now have been focused on releasing games on retro consoles, a very niche market, but that made them perfect to create the retro-style pixelated FNAF game Into the Pit.
I started making a game actually. I got to level 1, and I stopped there. Well, because I was spending like a day or two trying to figure out how to make a teleporter. And I couldn't figure it out. So I'm stuck on level 1. I need to figure that out still, because I gave up like a couple months ago.
Releasing later this year. By pairing up with these smaller companies that aren't insanely well known, Scott's not only been able to make bigger, better games, he's also been able to use his single game's success to put millions of eyeballs and millions of dollars into each of these companies. As a result of their work with FNAF, Illumix started working with Disney on features found throughout the parks. And if Steel Wool ever do release a game outside of FNAF in the future, you can bet that it's gonna have itself a fan base attached to it because people now know about them, and they're gonna want to see what other work they can do.
I could work on it a little bit off
side, or at least it's on the official game side, but stopping there would be overlooking the much bigger impact FNAF has had on the games that haven't even been released yet. This one series inspired a whole new generation of game designers unlike any game that's ever really come before. All of them cutting their teeth on a genre that exploded in the mid-2010s, the FNAF fan game. Five Nights at Treasure Island, Five Nights at Wario's, Pop Goes, The Joy of Creation, Those Nights at Rachel's, Afton Build, Glitched Attraction, Bloody Nights Juniors, Day Shift at Freddy's.
Thanks! What is this game?
I could go on and
a game I will be putting on my channel soon. I will be
on and on for days. Some of
1
these were
through
just for
5.
memes, others were more serious attempts at making games inspired by FNAF, and many of them were just taking the
Ooh, Pork Chops is a terrifying
that
game.
Scott had created and broadening it outward into the game that they wanted to see made. If you go onto Game Jolt, you'll find thousands of fan games, and I do mean thousands. If you search just for FNAF and select games, you're presented with 36 games per page and 277 pages available. That is 9,961 games that are tagged using FNAF. And if you're sitting there thinking, hold up,
FNAF, the movie, the game.
is 9,000
Wait, that's by Scott. What does it mean FNAF, the movie, the game? I gotta check that out.
961 games that are tagged using FNAF. And if you're sitting there thinking, hold on, the math there doesn't add up, you're right, good noticing. That's because I had to remove 11 of Scott's own games that were posted on that list. Though, I'm pretty sure that there are some out there who'd like to pretend that FNAF World was a fan game. Each and every one of those 10,000 fan games represents a budding game designer, sometimes several. And well, yeah, many of those creators are likely never going to pursue game design full-time. There are some who will, either independently or as part of a bigger studio, going on to have their shot at creating their own mega franchise, their shot to transform the industry. And already you can see that some of these devs are finding success to the point where many of them have created multiple different games at this point, turning their fan projects into full-on franchises
Hello. Oh, what's up, old caller?
And all of this is without even mentioning
from,
the fan
Georgia stream. How you
Scott
doing?
invested money and resources into some of the most
I'm
promising
looking at this
projects
game.
of
I didn't even know it
businesses
was made.
Now,
Called
the
FNAF,
success
the
of that
movie,
one
the
is up for
game.
debate for
Made by
various
Scott.
reasons, but the point ultimately stands. Five
I'll have
Nights
to
at
play
Freddy's
that
has
on
been
stream
directly
sometime.
and indirectly involved in the rise of a new generation of game developers. Developers that, just now, 10 years later, we're only starting to see get to a point where they're really influencing the wider gaming landscape. Except gaming, it's already seen a massive shift coming off the heels of FNAF. Prior to FNAF's release, if you took a look at any top 10 list about horror games, it would have been filled with games like Outlast, PT, Amnesia, games that leaned hard into psychological horror and sometimes graphic gore. FNAF, though, was different.
I don't think I have. I saw you talking about a game in chat,
what the monster
The
looked
Secret of the
relying on
Mimic.
the audience's mind
But I
to
think
fill
there
in
was
the blanks of
another
what might be
one.
lurking in the shadows. FNAF put the monsters front and center.
I mean, I didn't even know
allowing
about
them
this
to be the star
game
of the
right
show,
here.
like we see in movies like Friday the 13th.
Now you're just a horror fan? Same. So that's all this channel is really going to be. But I didn't even know this was a game right here. FNAF, the movie, the game. I didn't know this dude made this 10 months ago. Interactive. So I want to see if there's comments on here, but I don't know. I'm going to download this though. I'll have to check it out later.
13th and Halloween. This allowed FNAF games to be much more thumbnail friendly and easier to sell online compared to the spooky dark hallways or overcomplicated monster designs that dominated the horror space in the past. Mix in the more family friendly scares of Freddy and the gang, and you've got yourself a brand new subgenre of content, mascot horror, as dubbed by YouTuber John Wolf. This genre took old nostalgic locations and filled them with brightly colored killers brought to life through some weird experiment or trauma. Bendy and the Ink Machine, Poppy Playtime, Rainbow Friends, My Friendly Neighborhood, Hello Neighbor, Baldi's Basics, Choo Choo Charles, Amanda the Adventure, and of course, Garten of Banban. And that's not even dipping into the hundreds of lesser-known titles.
I don't know if Garten of Banban is that scary, but I'm gonna play
Joyville.
it.
It was FNAF who paved the way for all of these games. Poppy sold 2 million copies in 2 years. Bendy has made over $30 million just off of its 2 major installments. Hello Neighbor is a thing that continues to exist. And while people complain about oversaturation in the market at this point, there is no denying that the formula has worked extremely well for the better part of the last 10 years. But maybe you're sick of games.
Season was a terrifying game.
I hope you're excited to read the 7 Hello Neighbor books, 5 Bendy books, or the Poppy Playtime Employee Handbook that's coming out later this year. Mascot horror franchises now also line the shelves of your local Barnes & Noble.
I've never watched anything
FNAF
on
did it first. Oh sure, Scholastic had done some video game book publishing in the past, mostly guidebooks and activity books, but after the success of the FNAF trilogy, they began to publish other video game books like Assassin's Creed Last Descendants, World of Warcraft Traveler. This led them to launch an entirely separate wing to their business, AFK, the video game specific book department. It's these guys who are publishing all the books that Tom is now gonna have to read. No, it's impossible to know for certain that FNAF was the reason for all this, but given it was often shown at the top of articles for this new publishing arm at launch and has sold 9 million books to date, with an average book price being about $10, that is $90 million infused into the
mascot horror franchise. Is it just like a horrible game?
No wonder the first 6 rows of their website are dedicated to FNAF. But without AFK, it's easy to imagine a world where these other mascot horror games games didn't get that chance, and all those writers who've now been able to make a living off of these franchises wouldn't be recognized like they are. I mean, take for instance Andrea Wagner, who wrote the vast majority of Fazbear Frights and Tales from the Pizzaplex stories. She's now getting DM'd by fans asking for lore clarifications, something I'm sure she never anticipated while working on her past writing projects, like her dog how-to book, Dog Parenting, or Alternate Beauty, the story of a big girl with big dreams. Her words, not mine. The same thing is now happening with another struggling industry, movies. After spending 8 years in production hell, losing directors, struggling with studios, and trying to nail down a script, Blumhouse eventually took the chance on FNAF, making the movie on a $20 million budget and earning back nearly $300 million. If you don't think Hollywood has taken strong notice of that when they are struggling to get butts in seats, you are wrong. You think it's a coincidence that 2 months after FNAF's release, Bendy announced his big screen debut? And while a Poppy Playtime movie was already in the works with Studio 71, I can almost guarantee conversations with studios around it have shifted in the aftermath of FNAF. And who knows what other mascot horror games might end up with movies down the line. And not only is it getting indie game movies greenlit, it's also reshaping film
Hello Neighbor was actually
as
pretty
they
good,
continue to fumble around in the dark, struggling to find ways to compete with online content. I've literally had conversations with people in the film space about how they're trying to tap into that FNAF audience, that online community. The success of this one film
I would only play the free one.
The types of movies that get made and how they look moving forward. I guarantee it. But while movie releases mean big bucks for big studios, the economic ramifications go way beyond just extra cash in the pocket of Jason Blum.
The Z8 is absolutely essential. Accuracy, speed, it's unbelievable.
The FNAF movie was shot in New Orleans, which, since Hurricane Katrina, has been an economically depressed part of the country. Now, I didn't know this at the time, but from speaking to local actors and business owners while I was down there filming last year, I learned that New Orleans actually has a long history in film production. When the state government of Louisiana first introduced tax breaks for film productions back in 2002, over 1,000 projects happened down there in the span of 7 years. Those productions created jobs, hired locals, and brought millions of dollars back into the city. However, pre-COVID, those incentives were rolled back, and productions have now started to move to other places like Georgia. That's why so many of the local actors and business owners I spoke with while down there were eager to see the FNAF movie in town. By shooting in New Orleans, a huge chunk of that $20 million budget was going to accommodations, drivers, caterers, local talent, location rentals, equipment, and other general resources that help local businesses thrive, and maybe start a domino effect to get other movies back in the region. Regardless of all of that, the point is that this one decision to try one final game, it's grown beyond itself. It's no longer about just making its own franchise full of games. It's spread to all corners of the media industry and to so many other IPs and creators, spawning a wave of new franchises and giving life to so many careers that otherwise might not have had a chance. But speaking of careers, there's one final area that's also needed to be addressed. An area that's been so affected by FNAF, it's crazy to not talk about. And that, of course, is here on YouTube. FNAF has done a lot of numbers for a lot of industries, but its effect on the YouTube landscape is still visible to this day, and in a much more obvious way. When FNAF first launched, it was just one of many games that YouTubers started playing because spooky games got big views. This game gave rise to some of the biggest names on the platform, names that are still going strong today. Let's players like Corey X Kenshin and Markiplier, who'd been on YouTube for a couple of years, but saw their careers accelerate in parallel alongside the FNAF releases. You also had a massive surge in nerdcore musical artists like The Living Tombstone, whose FNAF song was at 1 million views in a couple of weeks, whereas most other songs they would release would have a few 100,000 views months after release. And machinima creators started using FNAF models and characters to tell their own unique stories long before the FNAF movie ever hit theaters, racking up literally billions of views. But what truly sets FNAF apart were obviously the details cluing fans into the bigger story. Stories long before the FNAF movie ever hit theaters.
Plants of Freddy's Rap 1 through 4.
Racking up literally.
Yeah. Oh my god, they put 3 out of just this location.
What truly set FNAF apart were obviously the hidden details cluing fans into the bigger story. This, more than anything else, ignited the internet's passion like never before, giving rise to the theorist community. People like Dawko, Rezbowski, 8-Bit Ryan, Rytoast, ID's Fantasy, Hyperdroid, John FNAF, and of course,
never watched a single. I don't watch any of those people. I watched
going through this game
the only horror person I watched is Markiplier and
now, contrary to popular belief, FNAF wasn't the first thing that actually had us creating lore theories. That was always just part of the channel's DNA. But before FNAF, we were coming up with lore theories for franchises where the story was basically well known. Whether or not Majora's Mask is an allegory for grieving, you get the story of a moon crashing down. Regardless of whether Peach is Rosalina's mom, you get the basic premise of Mario Galaxy. Humans certainly might be Pokemon. That's not really affecting anyone's journey to become a league champ. But FNAF was different. It showed that games
Niners
could be
are
built off of withholding the lore and forcing the fan base to solve it. By leaving the door open and never confirming anything, Scott allowed YouTubers, Redditors, and just general fans to continually assess and reassess the lore, find new directions, new hot takes, and that means that we're still theorizing about it to this very day. Can it be frustrating?
What about ice pizza?
Absolutely. Heck, maybe now that I'm retiring from the channel, I can track Scott down and get some answers out of him. But it's also entertaining. And the success of this theory-based model on YouTube has carried over into the mainstream, where now almost every game and movie release is designed with theory crafting in mind. Well, it's impossible to calculate.
Did he just say that he was like retiring the channel early?
FNAF on YouTube, I was able to find that there are 106 videos with more than 10 million views each. Together, they total roughly 5.4 billion views on just their very own. And if we assume that they're getting the standard gaming CPM on YouTube, which is about $4.55, that then's a total earning across all of those videos of $24,570,000 in ad revenue. Markiplier's literally gone on record to say that the house that he lives in is the house that FNAF paid for, and he's joked on his Distractable podcast about how lucrative FNAF's been for him.
Let's go into a fan favorite here. Five Nights at Freddy's.
Boo. So there's two ways I could look at this, right? I could look at it from the game purely by itself, or I could look at it at the dividends it is paid out for me specifically.
And that's put him in a position to pursue bigger and loftier projects like the With Markiplier series, and now his movie Iron Lung. One half of the Living Tombstone, Sam Haft, is now writing songs for internet sensations like Has Been Hotel. YouTubers like FNAF and Rytoast, they've been able to go full-time with YouTube, all thanks to FNAF. And heck, look at us. Because of FNAF, we've thrived. We've been able to grow our team, give jobs to dozens of people, and perhaps best of all, we've carved out our own platform that allows us to turn the spotlight onto a next generation of creatives, to make us tastemakers in the space that are able to pay it forward, to make you aware of projects that you should be playing and watching, from Cooking Companions, to The Man in the Suit, to Shipwrecked 64, Welcome Home, Mandela Catalog, Walton Files. The list goes on and on and on. In short, FNAF created an ecosystem where new IPs can thrive, a virtuous cycle that benefited itself, to be sure, but also had a halo effect on dozens of other franchises looking to get attention. And all of this is without even mentioning other trickle-down effects. Our large platform allowed us to run charity events like St. Jude, paying that blessing forward to help doctors and hospitals working on treatments for childhood cancer, where of course, Scott himself was a sizable and direct contributor year after year. There were also dozens of other charity events coming from creators like Dawko, Markiplier, Jacksepticeye, Rytoast, John FNAF. Not only have these events been able to raise tens of millions of dollars for various organizations looking to do good work in the world, hopefully those events in turn inspired others, our audience or other creators, to adopt a spirit of generosity and giving in their own lives. And again, it all comes down to this one decision. One guy who in the face of adversity and criticism chose not to give up. That is the millions of people and billions of dollars affected by that one Snoopy Bear game. Thank you, Scott. Thank you for all of that. And while all of this is cool and
soon I will be posting.
It's also overwhelming, right? You look at the impact.
I'm not going to buy the FNAF games. I'm going to play the free ones, which is FNAF Plus.
So remember, it's all about small
I guess it's more scary or something.
Domino effect. Just being kind to someone else, saying something nice, holding a door, listening to someone's problems, making them laugh. All of those are seemingly small things that can make a massive difference.
Yeah, probably for the worst.
And that to me has always been the power of
I mean,
channels. They're a place to
if you really look at it,
a place to brighten your day.
Markiplier wouldn't be big. Game theory wouldn't be big. Film theory wouldn't be.
Which then you can
it still would be, but all these
and that positivity spreads. It spreads.
Big creators I got big off FNAF. The whole thing
honestly
wouldn't really be
about leaving these
big anymore.
Losing that chance to be a force of just a little bit of good in your life. But you know what? I'm not done yet. I'll see you one last time next week, March 9th at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific, as I celebrate with you one final time as a community. Until then, as always, remember, it's all just a theory. A game theory. Thanks for watching.
Kind of is terrifying. I mean, good thing we're in the universe that it did happen.
Fredbear's Family Diner.
Since I was like little, I've been watching FNAF.
This is where it all began. The animatronic empire, the string of deaths, and William's descent into madness. Everything stemmed from this one location. Or at least, that's what we all thought. Until today. Hello Hello Internet, welcome to Game Theory, where it is finally time. Today, I graduate from
British
FNAF
person
boy
talking.
to FNAF man and take on my very first FNAF theory. Although, I say that,
Oh,
I
it's
have
that
actually
guy.
been
It's
helping
Tom.
Matt write FNAF theories for the past 3 years.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks,
Have
Matt.
a safe flight back. I didn't get to talk to you about Gregory as a robot. It's all right.
Check out
To be fair, that was both of our sins.
Steel Wall Studios trailer.
out, my first FNAF theory, I threw something out.
Yeah,
Check that out.
Gregory as a robot, first FNAF theory, and look how well received it's been.
Look how good that's gone for all of us.
It's done so well
Yeah,
for
man,
all
Pat
of us.
does it. Well, he's
what
had a
could
son for a
possibly
couple
go
of years,
wrong?
though.
But don't worry, theorists. I promise today's theory
Right.
is way less crazy, hopefully. Because today, I'm going to be tackling one simple, teeny tiny detail that I think is really important to understanding this
Why
franchise.
is he doing a
Help
theory
Wanted
instead
2
of
was
Matt?
full of collectibles.
I mean, he
most of which you
retired
get
now,
from
I
a prize
think,
machine
but-
after you beat a minigame. Some are set prizes that relate to the level you just completed, like a sun figure for beating the first daycare mission, or a meat pretzel for beating the Fazbear
A
Theatre.
meat pretzel?
However, after you beat the game, there are some extra
What?
prizes to collect that are given to you at random when you replay a stage. Usually this is just extra plushies, models, or food. But sometimes you get posters, and one of these posters stood out above all the rest. It ends up on the back wall right next to the Faz Wrench entrance for the Princess Quest minigame. It's a poster
That's a
promoting
map
Fall
pad.
Fest 1970. Now, to the FNAF community, Fall Fest is nothing new. We first saw this name pop up almost 5 years ago in the Curse of Dreadbear DLC for the original Help Wanted. A Halloween-inspired event full of attractions, rides, and of course, spooky versions of all our favorite characters to fit in with the Halloween theme.
Dude, Halloween Foxy
Full of attractions, rides, and of course, spooky versions
Is-
of all our favorite
terrifying. I mean, look at him. He has to be one of my favorite animatronics.
characters to fit in with the
Meat
Halloween
pretzel,
theme.
that's
But
what
there is
Cassidy
one
caught in
crucial
Spring
difference
Lake,
between
yeah.
this Fall Fest and the one we see on the poster from Help Wanted 2, the date. The banners around the Curse of Dreadbear hub world show that this event was taking place in 1983, but this new poster is from over a decade before. This whole Fall Fest thing has clearly been running for a very long time. In fact, it's been running since before the earliest confirmed parts of the FNAF timeline. In the Silver Eyes, when Charlie is looking for news articles on Fredbear's Family Diner, she starts the search at 1979,
What's the new game?
seeming to imply that this was when the diner was founded. But that is 9 whole years after this poster was published. And that's not all. Look at the design of this poster. While it's advertising Fall Fest, it's not inherently spooky like the event we see for the Curse of Dreadbear. Instead, it has autumnal elements, but it's mostly designed to look like an old two-toned circus poster, complete with a giant circus tent right in the middle. And this isn't the first time Steel Wool has offered us hints that circuses might be important to this franchise. There's the mini games in Help Wanted 2 like the Carousel and Fazablast. There's the circus costumes that are down in the basement of Ruin. There's even circus-themed Funko merch. Clearly, Steel Wool is beating us over the head with this circus thing for a reason. But why? Well, back in 2022, in the build-up to Security Breach's Xbox port, Steel Wool did an interview with Game Jolt to talk about how they made Security Breach, give some updates on Ruin's development, and drop some little hints towards what might be coming down the pipeline for them and the FNAF franchise. And when asked what kind of game they'd like to make in the future, they said this.
One thing that I've always would love to do is get back to kind of like the origin of
Is it this that I'm looking at? What is this?
See how things
That's
were made.
fine.
Same here. I'd like to head further back into the 70s.
They want to create a game about the origins of Freddy's set in the 70s. Most of us at the time assumed this would just be Fredbear's Family Diner, but with all
Is
this
it
circus
the
imagery popping up, it
Find
begs the
Freddy's Secret of
question,
the
what if
Mimic?
Fredbear's Family Diner wasn't the origin of
Sure.
Freddy's? What if instead it was this
20
circus,
hours ago?
Fall Fest 1970?
Is it the
And once I realized
Secret
that,
of the Mimic? Oh, yeah, it
things
was like
started to
18
fall
hours
into
ago.
place.
Check that out
This
right now.
poster is the key to clarifying some massive holes in the FNAF timeline. It confirms a number of things we've been predicting for a while, and it shines a little more light on
Alright,
the
hold on, let me check that out right now. Okay, when I click on, there we go. I thought I clicked on the video, not a website. It's frozen. There we go. Put my other earbud in. I haven't been playing with Pokemon. Oh, geez. They sort of look like a puppet. $20.25. That's pretty safe. That was very
franchise's
sick.
latest villain. Come to think of it, maybe this isn't such a small theory after all. Whoops. So, you better grab your popcorn,
was pretty
theorists,
cool.
because the show is about to begin, and I'm going to reveal to you the true origins of Freddy's. But just before we get into that, I need to talk to you about something else that's really important. It's something you may have seen if you watch our own sister location, Style Theory. But we have an exciting theorist event coming up. We are putting on a fashion show. It's called Creators in Fashion, and there may be some hesitancy in me changing up the entire beginning of the timeline. I get it. It's a pretty big claim. And while there have been a number of hints towards circuses throughout the games and books, it doesn't necessarily mean that's where this whole thing started. So let's take a look at one of the more recent examples of the circus being hinted at,
really
so
cool.
I can show you where I'm coming from. In the basement of the Ruined DLC where you find the Mimic, there are two costumes hanging up. An old lady blackbird and an elephant dressed as a clown. In the game files, there's also a lion wearing a varsity jacket. 3 animals all associated with the circus. Elephants often perform tricks, lions were regularly tamed by lion tamers, and while crows or blackbirds aren't traditionally circus animals, they do often appear in circus-focused media like Disney's Dumbo. Plus, the elephant is literally dressed as a clown. It doesn't get more circusy than that. But the most important part isn't actually their circus theming. It's the fact they aren't animatronic suits. In our initial theory on Ruin, we talked about how these costumes seem to be related to circus babies because, you know, circus. However, when Circus Babies Entertainment and Rentals, or even Circus Babies Pizza World was due to launch, they were all animatronics, and complex ones at that. Why then would they have physical costumes? They wouldn't, unless these costumes actually came from something circus-themed that was before animatronics were part of this franchise. In The Mimic, not the robot, the Tales from the Pizzaplex story named after him, we learn of a character named Edwin who owns a robotics company, getting big off of making a robot vacuum cleaner. However, with the birth of his son, the death of his wife, and then the crippling pressure of running his own business, he decides to sell the company to none other than Fazbear Entertainment. Why does Fazbear agree to purchase? Because they want Edwin for his robotics knowledge. Specifically, they want him to turn their character costumes into full-blown animatronics. We've seen him do exactly this with Chica in the first few pages of the story. Later on, he goes on to explain that this is the 18th character he'd been asked to create, describing the collection as, quote, a circus-like array of animal and other character costumes. Circus-like, you say? We believed for a long time that Edwin is the book's parallel for Henry, the animatronic genius that helped Afton to grow Fazbear into the animatronic empire we know today. So the circus-themed costumes we see in the basement of Ruin likely came from that same time period, a period where Henry was transforming costumes into animatronics. And these costumes aren't Henry's only connection to the circus either. When Charlie goes back to her childhood home in the Silver Eyes, she looks through Henry's office and finds an assortment of books that, quote, would have seemed eclectic to anyone who didn't know the man. There were books on biology and anatomy, some on human beings, others on animals. There were books about the history of the traveling carnival and of the circus. There were books about child development, about myths and legends, and about sewing patterns and techniques. There were volumes that claimed to be about trickster gods, about quilting bees, and about football cheering squads and their mascots. Most of these make a lot of sense. Things like anatomy, mascots, sewing patterns, it all ties into the idea that he was creating characters and turning costumes into animatronics. The books about child development either tie into the fact that he was catering to kids and so was trying to figure out how he could best serve his customers, or it's linked to the human anatomy books and ties into Henry creating robot versions of his daughter Charlie. But there's one selection that has always stood out as odd, one that I've never had an explanation for, and that is the history of the traveling carnival and of the circus. Why would Henry need books on that topic if all the work he's ever done is on animatronics and diners? He needs it because the origins of Fazbear are rooted in traveling circuses and carnivals. It was a hint as to the first years of this business. So this circus, Fall Fest, seems to be where Fazbear Entertainment all began. But now the question is, who else was there? And I don't mean human characters, let's be honest, we don't have many of them that are actually important, especially not back in 1970. I mean, which of the Fazbear characters were part of the original roster? As I've mentioned, during How Wanted 2, we get a number of minigames that take place in carnival-like settings, namely Fazablast and the Carousel. And it's the Carousel that I want us to take a look at first. The game itself is pretty straightforward, you know, when you don't have an Ash trying to desperately keep your microphone attached. Oh my god! Despite this, Matt did manage to notice a very interesting detail in the level's design, a random pumpkin, just sitting there waiting to be thrown. I think we can all agree that pumpkins are something we specifically associate with Halloween, and the only event we know to take place at Halloween in this franchise is, you guessed it, Fall Fest. We even get a Halloween-themed version of Moon appear during the Nightmare level of the Carousel ride. The Carousel is from Fall Fest, which means it's from the early part of the franchise. But then, take a look at the characters that are used on the Carousel. carousel. Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, which, you know, is what you'd expect. Except it's not just the original versions from FNAF 1. The one that immediately stands out to me is this white and pink version of Foxy. Funtime Foxy? Well, kinda. Because you might also notice it has a hooked hand. Something that Funtime Foxy is clearly lacking in Sister Location. However, there is a version of Funtime Foxy with a hook hand. And that's in FNAF World, a game that came out before Sister Location and doesn't have any other Funtime animatronics present, implying that Funtime Foxy didn't originally belong with that group of animatronics, instead belonging to an
there's no like
set,
base plates. I keep trying to pause and keep showing something else.
Cell tells us exactly which group that is. The other characters on this ride, besides Funtime Foxy and the original 4, all have rosy red cheeks, which aligns with the toy animatronics from FNAF 2. Toy Freddy, Toy Bonnie, Toy Chica, and Funtime Foxy, the toy version of Foxy. The toy animatronics being here feels wrong, doesn't it? The toys don't become a thing until 1987 with their special recognition software and new, more complex endoskeletons. They replaced the old withered versions of the original Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy from the original Freddys. How then are they on a ride from 1970? Well, this is because I don't think the toy animatronics are meant to call back to the 1983 Freddy's animatronics. They're supposed to be referencing the original circus costumes. Going back to the Mimic story, once Edwin abandons the warehouse, Fazbear employees are sent in to collect any Fazbear property. Things like their costumes. One character mentions a few of them: a brown Freddy Fazbear costume, a yellow Chica costume, a Foxy costume, a Bonnie costume. The original 4 were all in existence as costumes before their introduction as animatronics at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. And what's even crazier is the designs of those costumes actually exist. A few years ago, there was a, let's just say controversial, but at the time official FNAF artist that dropped an image onto the FNAF subreddit with zero context or explanation. The only thing we knew is that these images contained Scott's official copyright. These images were commissioned by Scott, which makes them as good a piece of evidence as any. And what are these images of? Versions of Freddy, Bonnie, and Chica in a similar style to the mascot costumes you'd find at a theme park like Disneyland, all with large proportions and big round heads in order to have a human fit inside them. These appear to be the original. They still only have 4 fingers, not 5. Where were these costumes used? I suspect so where's their 5th finger go? Circus. Why? Well, notice the bright red cheeks. Exaggerated features like big red noses or cheeks have been used by clowns and circus performers for centuries. Joseph Grimaldi is recognized as being the ancestor for modern clowns, and in 1802 he created the design for his most iconic character, Joey the Clown. And one of this character's iconic features was painted red cheeks. Similarly, Albert Fratellini is known to have helped redefine a type of clown in the mid-1900s known as the August Clown, complete with the bright red nose we know today. Why did both these performers feel it necessary to have bright red features for the evolution of the clown? Because when the word clown was first recorded in 1560, it meant rustic, poor, or peasant. This often boiled down to one simple stereotype: the town drunk, who you would often see after he'd had a bit too much to drink, with a bright red nose and red cheeks. This happens when your body isn't able to digest alcohol properly, causing a release of histamines that essentially cause your face to have an allergic reaction, namely red cheeks and nose. The idea of referencing this was to make clowns or characters immediately look foolish, silly, or disarming, so people would be quicker to laugh at them rather than be scared of them, which is pretty ironic when you think about it. That is why I believe these costumes are circus costumes, not because they're trying to make characters look like drunks. That wouldn't be very child-friendly. It was to invoke those same reactions of silly, goofy fun. And the kicker is you can see this trait carried over into the most definitively circus costume we've got available, elephant costume down in the ruined basement. Usually you don't get a chance to see them up close, but freeze the frame just right, or, you know, search the game files, and you'll find that although a little faded,
that was made by
Fusion Game has rosy red. Or, you know, search the game files, and you'll find that although a little faded, it too has rosy red cheeks.
Maybe
so
he might have just
characters
it too.
like the ones we see in these designs would have been right at home at a circus, which also opens up the door to other red cheeked characters from this franchise to potentially be part of the original roster. Maybe characters that weren't originally animal costumes, but more likely humans wearing the same kind of face paint. Case in point, Balloon Boy. Hello. Balloon Boy has never really fit in anywhere. We turned on FNAF 2 and he was just there, and we've hated him ever since.
I said,
I'm sure nobody likes him.
But in Security Breach, he got his own arcade cabinet, Balloon World. And if you played that game, you'd see a circus tent in the background. Balloon Boy's only standalone adventure places him at the circus. But while he never fit in with FNAF 2's characters, he did have a striking resemblance to a handful of characters in Sister Location and Circus Babies. Other wooden puppets like the Magician and Fortune Teller, all jobs that would be found at a circus. Selling balloons was an important part of any circus, so Balloon Boy with his little sign offering them to children would be right at home with the rest of them. And to top it all off, when Funko decided to release their new circus line of FNAF products, it contained not just clown versions of all the characters, but versions of all of them wearing Balloon Boy's iconic outfit. We were being shown.
One thing I just want to say, that was back in like 1970s. How do they have such... If Balloon Boy's from the 1970s, and he's an animatronic, how do they have like such good like machinery and stuff like that?
Balloon characters, and specifically that outfit, are inherently tied to the circus. Balloon Boy has to be a part of this. Full Fest is where he
has a criminal recognition database.
Finally makes sense. Another example would be Circus Baby. She's been showing up a lot in recent games, just like the circus imagery, so it feels like Steel Wool are purposely trying to connect the two. She's also got the red cheeks we've talked about, as well as that white face paint that we see on most traditional clowns. She'd fit right in at a circus. Plus, you know, she's literally got circus in her name. Maybe this character, whose placement in the timeline has perplexed us for so long, belongs way earlier in the franchise's history than any of us expected. But above those two, in the books, there is one other costume that gets called out. The core four, but always one more. A jester costume. Now, I'm sure Matt is once again freaking out because jesters aren't clowns and they aren't part of a circus. And dude, I get it, but just trust me on this. In that quote from the Mimic story about the rack of costumes, after listing off the main four characters we know and love, they finish off by adding, and bright pink, yellow, green court jester costumes. Similar to the colors we see Sun wearing in Security Breach. Yeah, I know, they're a little off, but they're pretty close. And just look at the rest of his costume. Curly pointed toes with bells, puffy trousers, or pants I suppose, and the tutu-like frills on his waist and ankles. He is 100% meant to be a court jester. He even jumps out of a freaking castle when we first meet him in Security Breach. And as Matt was very keen to point out, jesters originated as performers for royalty in their castles during the Middle Ages. Finally, there's the epilogues, where the jester character once again returns, but this time we get a description of its mask. Quote, Lucius stepped up to the costume, suppressing a shiver at the jester's leering, toothy grin and its wide eyes. One of Sun's most distinct features is his obnoxious, toothy grin. It's so iconic that he had to have teeth underneath his teeth just in case. And those large vacant eyes definitely give off that leering vibe that Lucius was describing. So even though Sun doesn't have the red cheeks like we talked about,
but he still has them.
Appears to be very obviously connected to the original crew. Freddy,
maybe not him, maybe someone else,
and Bonnie, as well as the circus. He is the last one mentioned when they're all being listed off, as if the costumes were grouped together, like they came from the same collection of characters. Characters that came from Fazbear's circus days. Sun and Moon actually make a lot of sense as characters in a traveling circus. In the tale story Bobby Dots, we get a bit of much needed backstory on this character who just showed up in Security Breach, not matching any of the 80s-tastic designs of the Pizzaplex. It turns out they weren't always a daycare attendant, but instead a performer. They put on shows where Sun would be the hero, and when the lights went out, Moon would appear as the story's villain. That ties into the comedy and tragedy masks that we found in Ruin. Masks that display Sun and Moon's face. So it would have also been an ideal performance to keep kids entertained at a circus venue. And later on, when the daycare was introduced, that same Bobby Dot story describes the daycare's design as a carnival-like space, hammering home the connection to the character's origins. And then the icing on the cake, during Help Wanted 2, he is the one we face when we're trying to fix the carousel from those old Fall Fest days. He's been there since the start. And when you think about it, in the early days of the franchise, when you're trying to keep costs down, buying a full mascot costume or fursuit from a trusted provider can cost upwards of $5,000, while costumes for professional jesters and clowns are typically just a few $100, keeping costs nice and low when you're first starting out. It really feels like the circus origin is helping characters that are out of place have a place to finally belong. Sun and Moon, Baby, Balloon Boy, all of them will be right at home here at the circus. However, Fall Fest isn't
It would make most sense for Balloon Boy, I guess. Not for Baby. She's too, like, advanced and futurized to be in the circus.
The origins of the Fazbear
like
franchise.
opening
It's
faceplates and
also
all
the
that.
origins of William Afton's first major tragedy. Fazablast in
Oh,
Help 1
dang.
and 2 is a shooting gallery that matches the design of the hub world during the Curse of Dreadbear DLC. Dreadbear even makes an appearance at the attraction, so this attraction clearly takes place during Fall Fest 1983. However, the penultimate Fazablast level ends with you shooting a number of rockets and popping all the balloon versions of the animatronics that appear. Doing so seems to cause a chain reaction that leads to the whole thing ending up in flames. And when you go back for the final level, the place is burnt to the ground. We see the same thing happen during the carousel ride. As you try to fix it, sparks fly and the thing lights up, leading to the nightmare version of the level where the whole place is already ablaze. And if you go out of bounds during that carousel level, you can see the red sky, burnt trees, water tower, and windmill that are all present during that final Fazablast level off in the distance. Steel Wool is clearly showing us that much like every other establishment in this franchise, this event, Fall Fest 1983, ended in fire. 1983 sucked for this franchise, but especially for Afton. He loses his kid to a malfunctioning Springlock suit and his other son's negligence. Fredbear's family diner gets shut down, and to top it all off, he loses the thing that started this whole business, the circus. Steel Wool is all about a sympathetic villain backstory.
Try not to set out to make a cool looking villain. Go make a monster that have a reason for it. These aren't just like these supernatural forces that came out of nowhere to just hurt people and punish people, right? Like there were results of other wrongdoing.
Adding a fire to an already pretty awful list of tragedy and loss, it would make it a little less surprising that Afton could suddenly snap and go on a murder spree. But this fire tells us more than just how this first chapter in FNAF history ended. It also tells us that there was one other character here, someone else present from the beginning that you wouldn't suspect. The Mimic. Yeah, I know, I was surprised too, but everything seems to be pointing to this guy being here since the earliest days of the franchise. We get a lot of different...
Honestly, I kind of see that. I mean, look at him.
Pointing to this guy being...
I mean, if this would go away, but you could see, like, that's like wood or something. That's like barely holding on. He looks like one of the earliest animatronics made because he's less advanced, I guess.
Here since the earliest days of the franchise. We get a lot of different descriptions for the Mimic during the epilogues of Tales from the Pizzaplex. Sometimes it's a traditional endoskeleton, other times it's a spider-like mess of slimy black wires. But when we are first introduced to it, we're given one extra detail. A detail that I never fully understood. Quote, it wasn't just a basic metal structure. Its steel frame was contained within a building collection of metal rods and curved plates and an impressive system of ball joints and pistons. All of it was topped with a long, vaguely rectangular shaped shiny steel skull. The skull was the only part that was shiny. The rest was dark and discolored, as if it had survived some kind of fire. That's a pretty specific way of phrasing it, especially when it points out that the head isn't blackened by the same issue. We're being given a clue as to where this Mimic came from, because the other detail that's important to bear in mind is that quote comes from the very start of the story, when the endoskeleton first arrives at the Pizzaplex. It was delivered to this location already burnt, which tells us that it had to be in a previous Fazbear fire, and I believe that fire was the fire of Fall Fest. But what makes me so sure that the Mimic got...
I think it did have a costume on before, but it burnt off.
Burned during that fire specifically? Here's the thing. I know we always joke that everything in this franchise ends in fire, but we can actually count the number of fires on one hand, even if you're an animatronic with only 4 fingers, which means it shouldn't be too difficult to go through each one and determine which one the Mimic came from. Working backwards, there's a fire at the end of Security Breach if you beat the burn trap ending. Afton is defeated, the blob steals him away, and the entire Pizzaplex catches fire and collapses. But as we've talked about before, it doesn't seem like this is the canon ending for Security Breach. We find Gregory's drawings for the non-canon endings during Ruin, and the last one we collect is his drawing of the burn trap ending, which means this fire wasn't a real fire. And even if it was, this ending takes place at the Pizzaplex, so the Mimic couldn't have been delivered to the Pizzaplex burnt from a fire, as the burn trap ending comes later in the timeline. Second option is the FNAF 6 fire, but once again we face issues with timeline.
I don't know if this is one or two,
built on top of the FNAF 6 location, which means the Mimic wouldn't be able to be delivered to that location when the Pizzaplex is being constructed, like we see in the book, because it would have already been there. The only other fire left other than Fall Fest is the FNAF 3 fire, but the owners of Fazbear Fright seemed pretty stoked when they found their first working animatronic, Springtrap. Up until this point, they'd only had bits and pieces like a foxy head. So it feels like they'd have also made a pretty big deal of finding a Mimic, bringing it back to the location, even if they thought it was just an endo. So it doesn't feel like it can be that one either, which leaves only one fire for the Mimic to have been burnt in, the fire of Fall Fest 1983, meaning the Mimic mimic has been around for a long time.
There is
So,
nothing
come
like
on.
a Wendy.
You're not gonna hear this. I'm muting it. Hurry up.
Wendy's.
We actually theorized this back when we covered Sun and Moon after the events of Ruin. We connected the mimics thrown together, thin, simple animatronic design to that of Sun and Moon. Namely, a very weird but distinct feature, independently moving teeth.
Which
it's a
is
strange
weird.
design detail that we've never seen before. So for both characters to have the same detail in the same game makes it seem like they have to be connected in some way. And if Sun and Moon come from the early Full Fest origins of the franchise, then the mimic being around at the same time would explain that connection. But there's one more detail that tells me that the mimic has to have been around during the Full Fest era of FNAF, something that's been right under our noses for years. For a while now, we believed that the Glitchtrap virus in Help Wanted 1, the virus that takes the shape of a yellow bunny rabbit and takes over Vanessa's mind, isn't actually William Afton himself, but instead a version of the mimic program that is mimicking Afton's behavior. In the game, we heard about Fazbear trying to keep costs down for this new game they're developing.
I mean, they sent us that stuff in the first place with no explanation, told us to scan it, said it would expedite the process so we wouldn't need to program any pathfinding ourselves. It was a budget thing, I guess. It was just junk, circuit boards and things like that. Look pretty old.
That game was Help Wanted. It's an in-universe game that takes the original FNAF games and turns them into new VR experiences, which is exactly what we learn happened to the Mimic program in The Storyteller. Quote, it's a simple template-style software that takes previously created stories and rearranges them into new scenarios for VR, AR, and arcade games. That is what Glitchtrap is. The Mimic program, having been scanned into the system, gets a crash course in Afton's murdery tendencies and is now mimicking it. Hence, he appears as Afton's iconic yellow rabbit. Except there's one part of this explanation that never sat right with me. If the Glitchtrap mimic was learning about Afton from the in-universe games of FNAF 1 to 6, then why does he take this form? Afton in all of those games, even in the 8-bit minigames, is always wearing his Springlock suit, because that was the costume he wore at Fredbear's Family Diner. But the version of the suit the mimic shows us as Glitchtrap is a completely different design, and at the time, we'd never seen this version before. This isn't his Springlock suit. It's a hand-sewn suit with plastic-looking facial features similar to the ones we saw on that concept art. Those suits came from Full Fest, and so it would make sense for this hand-sewn golden rabbit suit to have also come from the same time period. But for the mimic to have been able to copy this design, it would have to have some memory of this version of Afton in its memory banks prior to being uploaded to the Help Wanted game system. It would have to have observed Afton perform in this iconic golden rabbit costume alongside a golden singing bear at Full Fest. The mimic would have to be around during the early costume days of the franchise. Tape Girl did say the circuit boards looked pretty old after all.
It was just junk, circuit boards and things like that. Look pretty old.
Maybe the mimic was originally meant to mimic Afton specifically. I'm not entirely sure of this, to be honest, but it does feel like this is where the clues might be heading. Both Full Fest and the diner were open until 1983 after all, so they coexisted for at least 4 years, with the diner opening in 1979. And we know that Afton was performing as Spring Bonnie at the diner, so it's possible that the mimic was part of Afton's plan to expand the business. He could literally be in 2 places at once. Eventually, the mimic would be locked underground, with some circuit boards containing its program set aside just in case. And when the mimic software was finally used again to help speed up the process of a new VR game, it was shown all of those old FNAF games. And while it watched and learned, it recognized someone, William Afton, the golden rabbit from the circus, and so decided to take on the form it remembered from all those years ago, creating the monster we have spent the last 3 games and 2 DLCs trying to stop. But hey, that's just a theory. A game theory! Thanks for watching.
Oh, it's our last one right here. And then we're done with this, and we're getting, it's not Matt Pat. Oh, featured Matt Pat. Okay, good. 3 to go. Yeah, that's one until we get onto our game.
His name has been found. That's right, we finally have an answer for a question that has stumped this community for a literal decade. And the craziest part of all of it, it was solved by a channel with only 1 video. Matt must be rolling in his retirement grave.
We'll just see about that.
It's probably
Hello,
just
Internet! Welcome to Game Theory, the show that's happy to let someone else solve FNAF for a change. Since the release of Security Breach, it feels like there's been a massive new wave of FNAF theorizing on YouTube. We've seen the rise of people like John FNAF, Rye Toast, ID's Fantasy, and dozens more, all joining us in the good fight to try and solve the infuriating lore of this franchise. And just over a month ago, a new challenger, or should I say challengers, entered the ring. The channel Dual Process Theory. And they went big for their first outing, making the claim that they'd solved the entirety of FNAF in their very first video. And not only were they laying down a timeline for the whole series, they also claimed to have solved a particular mystery that has been bugging us theorists for a long time. What is the name of the crying child? After nearly 10 years, we still just call him the crying child, despite the fact that every other character in this franchise seems to get a name. Mike, Elizabeth, Charlie, even the missing children got names. So why is this kid's name left blank? Well, according to Dual Process Theory, it's not that he doesn't have a name, it's that we just missed it. We've had the name all along, we've just been giving it to someone else. They suggest that the crying child's name is Cassidy, the name we found all the way back in the word search of the survival logbook. The same name that, for the longest time, we have given to the vengeful spirit from Ultimate Custom Night, the one Afton should not have killed. Not only that, but they claim that the child we thought was Cassidy doesn't even exist. For years, we've assumed that there are 7 dead kids, 5 missing children's incident victims, including Cassidy, Charlotte, Emily the puppet, and the nameless crying child. But instead, they claim that there have only ever been 6, with the final missing kid and the bite victim being one in the same, Cassidy Afton. It's a bold claim, but when you get into the meat of it, their argument is actually quite compelling. So I went back to the drawing board and started mapping out the pieces myself to see if I could come to that same conclusion. Is the crying child actually Cassidy? Ladies and gentlemen, it's...
Hey Tom, what you doing?
Oh, hey Matt, I'm kind of in the middle of solving FNAF.
Yeah, okay. I'm sure you have a theory that changes everything. A clue that we missed?
Kinda, yeah.
Perfect. Well, before you fire up the old Golden Freddy thumbnail and then slap a dark truth on that, I've got another puzzle for you to solve. Lore-fi. It's the music-based mystery project that I've been working on. Basically, it's what you get if you have Lo-Fi Girl, but you mix in a murder mystery.
Because who hasn't ever wondered that?
I know! But the good news is you don't have to wonder anymore, because episode 1 is finally ready. On one level, you can just study and relax and sleep to the music that you're listening to. In fact, you've been listening to one of the tracks this whole time. And there's gonna be new music releasing every week on our Lore-Fi Spotify channel. But you know what? If you want to go a level deeper, hidden within some of that music and the videos that exist here on YouTube, there are clues pointing at the story of a missing kid. A missing kid named Gregory.
Gregory? Seriously, Matt?
Yeah, hear me out. Yeah, I got nothing. I just wanted to meme on the name. Good news though, my Gregory, not a robot.
Yeah, sure, for now. I assume you put a link in the description on your way in.
I did indeed, sir. And people should definitely click on it because like I said, there's gonna be new secrets waiting to be discovered every week over on Spotify and a new animation dropping roughly once a month and a half here on YouTube. All as we help a new character, Taylor, solve the deadly game that she accidentally finds herself trapped in.
Do I really have to solve this? I kinda got my hands full with all the FNAF stuff coming down the pipeline. I was actually just about to do a Morty on Dual Process Theory's theory.
Oh, I remember that one. It's a great video. But you do realize the M in Morty stands for Matt Pat, right? Matt Pat occasionally reviews theories, yo.
Huh, didn't think about that. Say, Matt, I know you're kind of retired and everything, but seeing how Dual Process Theory's video was a 2-person effort and you're already here, how'd you like to tag team this FNAF theory?
I mean, it's a little cramped in the recording closet with the two of us, but sure, why not?
Awesome, and now I don't have to change the theme
song.
Hit it, Yossi.
Leave your theories in the comments below. I'll pick my favorites in the next episode of Morty.
First things first, it's probably a good idea that we recap the main evidence points Dual Process Theory has for the crying child being Cassidy. Their video is nearly 2 hours long after all. Who has that much time? Well, except for you, considering you took over 4 hours to react to it.
Look, I'm retired now. I've got nothing but time. But I think you're right. So let's quickly recap, starting with the first major point, how we got the name in the survival logbook. Now, this book has been a cornerstone of the FNAF franchise since its release.
Snap that back for the last one.
We have 3 separate people speaking to us. Michael Afton, who writes in red pen, a spirit that writes in faded text, and a third person that alters the text of the book. The faded text writes the words "my name" on a number of the pages, and on those pages there's always some sort of weird number. Take all those numbers and turn them into coordinates for the word search, and bam! You get the name Cassidy.
It sounds so simple now, but I remember ripping my hair out over this at the same time you were.
But the key to the whole thing was one very important usage of my name. On one of the pages, the my name appears on a gravestone, just like the gravestone missing a name from FNAF 6's ending, which, it should be remembered, released around the same time as this book. So it seemed pretty darn obvious that these clues were revealing the name of that final character, the fifth missing child, which is why for the longest time we've been calling the fifth child Cassidy.
And this is where dual process theory throws their first spanner into the works.
You mean wrench?
Look, you chose a British guy to take over. This is what you get. While yes, my name appeared on every page the clues were hiding, notice what's on the opposite page of the word search. A mirror. And under it, the spirit leaves a message. What do you see? Well, what's on the other page? A crying child using altered text in the word search. It's me, Cassidy. God, it's so good!
It is pretty compelling, especially because, in all honesty, the placement of that mirror always felt suspicious to me. So I really like them using it for their theory. But if crying child is Cassidy, then who else is speaking in the book? You need a second spirit to act as the faded text.
Well, according to them, it's Charlie, the puppet, doing what she's been trying to do the entire series, help the lost spirits find themselves.
And again, I gotta say, I really like that. Narratively, that's really satisfying because it brings together the three main characters from the franchise all in the same place. Mike with his red pen, crying child Cassidy as the altered text, and Charlie guiding the conversation as the ghostly faded text. It's cool and it feels complete,
Cassidy.
But is there actual evidence to support this, or is it all hypothesis? And that's not all. Dual process theory weren't just satisfied with crying child having Cassidy's name, they went further to suggest that the crying child is Cassidy, as in Cassidy is an Afton and the fifth missing child on the gravestone and the spirit within Golden Freddy, the only spirit inside a Golden Freddy, as opposed to most of our theories where the crying child is one half of our best golden boy.
They also have the evidence to back it up. The first point is that Golden Freddy doesn't speak in plurals. When you take a look at the one line we ever get from Golden Freddy, what do we see? It's me. Me, singular, implying that there's only one spirit in there. Compare that to what we see in the books. Throughout the series, there have only been 2 instances of animatronics possessed by multiple people. The first is the Stitch Wraith from Fazbear Fright's epilogues. The second is Rosie Porkchop from the Fazbear Fright story Together Forever. And while the Stitch Wraith isn't able to speak until the second...
I think they labeled that wrong. I think this is Rosie Porkchop and then this is the Stitch Wraith.
From the Fazbear Fright story Together Forever. And while the Stitch Wraith isn't able to speak until the second soul is gone, Rosie Porkchop speaks while still containing both spirits, and refers to itself as ladies in waiting. It's using plurals showing the 2 spirits.
We're gonna come back to that point, right?
Yeah, don't worry, we're gonna come back to all of this.
Okay, great, because I have thoughts on that one.
The second point they bring up is everyone's favorite FNAF 3 classic, Happiest Day. This is the final minigame where we see the puppet giving cake to the birthday child, surrounded by their friends in animatronic masks. Once the puppet delivers the cake, the child stops crying, puts on their Golden Freddy mask, and all the children's spirits move on.
Well, except for Charlie, because she's still got to show up in FNAF 6.
Yeah, because nothing can ever just be as it seems with this franchise. But there is one thing that I think we can both agree is very straightforward. There are only 6 kids at this party, the 5 missing children and the puppet. If there were supposed to be 2 spirits inside Golden Freddy, why isn't there a 7th kid? Which ties in perfectly to point number 3, the glowing eyes at the end of FNAF 3.
This one's personal, so I'll take it. As a reminder, if you beat FNAF 3 without doing the Happiest Day minigame, you get the game's bad ending. This gives us a screen where our 4 main animatronics each have one glowing eye, symbolic of the fact that their spirits haven't been released yet. Seems pretty self-explanatory, right? But then look who we have in the back. Golden Freddy, with not just one glowing eye, but 2. This was always the backbone to the whole 2 spirits debate. The idea that, unlike all the other animatronics who each had one kid's spirit inside of him, Golden Freddy was different. He had 2, both the innocent crying child spirit and the vengeful spirit Cassidy, the 5th victim. It was a theory that was further supported by the books, specifically the Stitch Wraith stingers, where we see an animatronic possessed by 2 spirits, a nice wholesome kid named Jake and an evil angry spirit named Andrew, one who dies in a hospital setting like the crying child and one who dies by a brutal murder from Afton. I mean, the parallels are hard to deny. However, Dual Process challenges this by calling out the fact that if there were were indeed two spirits in the body, why then do both eyes go out once you complete Happiest Day? Especially since we've believed that the Cassidy spirit lingers on to torture Afton in Ultimate Custom Night. Only one light should have gone out, to which I have one answer: retcon. But obviously that's a bit of a cheap explanation if we can avoid it.
Which brings us to Dual Process's last point. How can the crying child be the fifth missing kid when, very clearly, he's not missing? Like, he's literally right here in front of a large room of people. Well, they make the assumption that this was all part of William's scheme. After the bite of 83, William pulls his child out of the hospital, and while experimenting with harvesting remnants, has the bright idea to stuff his son into Golden Freddy. Whoops! Bad idea, Will. It doesn't work, and the spring locks kill him, which is why we see Golden Freddy twitching in Ultimate Custom Night in the same way William does during the FNAF 3 teaser. This mistake devastates him, and in a drunken stupor, he lashes out at Henry's daughter, Charlie, killing her last. This then aligns with what we see from the gravestone puzzle in Help Wanted 2. To solve it, you have to light the gravestones marked by the 6 dead children in a specific order, presumably the order in which they died. Chica, the first, she has seen everything, followed by Foxy, Freddy, Bonnie, then Golden Freddy, and finally the puppets. Later, when the police start to investigate the disappearances at the restaurant, William claims his child also went missing to throw them off the scent that he may be the killer.
Now, while I don't really love the logical jumps their explanation takes there, one thing I really do like about the crying child being the fifth missing victim, and therefore the only spirit inside Golden Freddy, is that it really does help clean up the numbers. For years, 5 was the magic number in FNAF when it came to dead kids. Then, around FNAF 3, it evolved into 6 with the inclusion of the puppet. And yet FNAF 4 shows us what was presumably a 7th kid dying in the form of the crying child. And while Help Wanted does eventually give us 7 graves and a hidden out-of-bounds Easter egg, it always bugged me that there was never a gravestone for him in the FNAF 6 ending. I always just assumed that it was because he ended up being different. He wasn't a victim of Afton's, and thus he wasn't included in that final image. But if Crying Child is in fact the 5th kid, it helps explain why there was never an additional grave for him, because he was always there to begin with. He was the one hidden behind the grass.
They also don't mention this in their theory, but in FNAF 3, look at the spirit who gets Afton's spring locks. They have tears streaming down their face, just like the crying child. We never see the other spirits' faces. We're specifically being shown that this one has tears, revealing that this isn't a separate spirit from the crying child. They are one in the same. Scott even used the same model in FNAF World specifically for the crying child.
To be fair, tears are everywhere in the series though. I mean, the puppet is shown crying literally all the time.
So, are we done? Did they solve FNAF? Can I retire now too?
No, you still have to solve Poppy.
No.
And Lorfi.
Okay.
And Ban Ban.
No!
Secondly, while this theory is really satisfying from a narrative standpoint, it helps to simplify a lot of the confusing elements that have built up over the years. There are a few pieces of evidence that they didn't mention that might poke a few holes in their theory.
Oh yeah?
So Tom, what's this sound?
It's a flatline.
And when does a flatline happen?
Well, a flatline is typically shorthand to show that someone has died, usually in a hospital.
Exactly. And during FNAF 4, we see things like IV bags, pills, and flowers surrounding the bed. All things that you would see in a hospital. Crying Child was in the hospital for his injuries, and then we hear a flatline right after Afton says that he's gonna put his son back together. Afton leaves, represented by psychic friend Fredbear fading away, which then leaves Crying Child alone in the dark. He's lost in the darkness. He's dead. He's alone. Everything about this cutscene seems to be suggesting that he died in this hospital. Could you potentially make the argument that William pulled his son off of life support in the hospital and brought him back to an underground bunker where he's gonna do experiments on him until he's able to bring him back to life? And that's why we hear a flatline here? Sure, you could make that argument, but it feels really overcomplicated just for the sake of your theory. And even still, if he did do all of that, there's a room full of people that saw Afton's son get bit. That make it pretty darn hard for Afton to convince anyone that his son went missing as part of some random killer's murdering spree.
There's also that whole speaking in plurals thing I know you had thoughts on.
Yes, thank you. I brought up earlier the huge number of parallels between the 2 spirits inside the Stitch Wraith in the books and the 2 spirits that are potentially inside of Golden Freddy
It's a fan mode.
in the games. Now, say what you will about book-based evidence, but the epilogues at the end of these things tend to be very important for storytelling. I mean, we saw that explicitly with the reveal of the Mimic. So to focus on this character of the Stitch Wraith, comprised of 2 spirits across 11 books, yeah, that feels pretty darn important. And in the Stingers, each spirit inside the Stitch Wraith speaks in the first person. So it would then make sense for one spirit inside of Golden Freddy to say, "It's me, singular. It's me, the crying child, your brother." But let's go a level level deeper. In the Stingers, the Stitch Wraith is made up of a mix of parts. Andrew, the angry one, is established to not be able to see because his part forms the body. Jake, the nice one, can see because his spirit is trapped in the head part. As such, he reports what's happening in the world back to Andrew in the body. And what do we see happening in the logbook? Well, it's a similar sort of dynamic. One spirit asks, "What do you see?" And the other one responds, "I can't see." It's a direct parallel. Even down to the Happiest Day minigame. There's a point in the Stingers when Jake is given the chance to move on and pass into the afterlife, but he chooses to linger back in order to help Andrew. Eventually, one of them moves on while the other is kept to Earth, held back by Afton. Sound familiar? It should. It once again parallels a lot of what we're seeing happen with Golden Freddy in the games.
On top of that, dual process theory reminded me of this moment in FNAF 4's minigames, where the crying child is locked in the back room with a Golden Freddy costume. They pointed out the tufts of hair coming out of the suit, explaining this to be an employee who bled out. However, in one of our videos, you made the valuable point that this head is just sitting too low in the torso. When adults wear it, we see their heads fully out, even when they're sitting. This is something that is explicitly shown to us in places like the graphic novels, which tells us then that the person in the suit here, it's gotta be a child. Again, we see this in the books. In Fazbear Frights, we have scenes where kids reach into the Golden Freddy suit and see black curly hair sitting inside. This is a dead kid that we know was put inside of Golden Freddy. Presumably, this should be the fifth missing child. This is why Crying Child's Fredbear plushie tells him, "Remember what you saw." He has literally seen the deaths of other kids.
You ever thought that maybe that's the answer?
What do you mean?
Well, is it possible that the story is actually way simpler than we, the FNAF community, have made it out to be? I mean, look at the scene. Like, really look at the scene. It is pretty darn self-explanatory. A kid is locked in the storage closet and literal tufts of hair are sticking out of the suit. I remember when I first saw this scene, I overthought this thing to death, assuming that it had to be more than just hair sticking out of the suit. Maybe they were wires or tufts of suit hair or something like that, because this was 1983, and by all accounts, it was the first location. It was Fredbear's Family Diner, the beginning of the timeline. The missing children's incident didn't happen here. It was at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Clearly, these brown pixels had to represent something else, but in retrospect, the scene is pretty explicit. There's a kid dead in this suit. Done, cut and dry. Remember what you saw? You saw a dead kid. We, as theorists, are so often desperate to search for narrative satisfaction. We bend over backwards to try and justify timelines where Afton is killing kids because of Elizabeth's death, or because he's trying to put his son back together and he wants to run experiments to harvest remnant from other kids. But what if he's just a weird, sick dude who just started killing kids one day? No overcomplicated backstory required. I didn't get to talk about this before leaving the channel, but in Help Wanted 2, if you light the final gravestones in a very specific order, you unlock a huge lore clue in the form of the Bonnie mask. This is the moment that basically confirms that we're playing the game as Bonnie Bro. But the order of the gravestones, it feels very intentional. They explicitly give us an order of events. Chica first, then Foxy, Freddy, Bonnie, Golden Freddy fifth, Puppet last. It was really confusing because Charlie dying last didn't make any sort of sense. What about this?
A wound first inflicted on me.
And yet this gravestone evidence is what the games are telling us. It's also kind of what we're seeing in FNAF 4. If that tuft of hair is to be believed, and really, why wouldn't we believe it? That gravestone timeline could probably be right. Afton was just killing kids because he could. He was a deranged serial killer.
Man, retirement really has taken a toll on you. But I also think I see where you're going with this. Crying Child witnesses the dead kids in the suits and then gets bit by Fredbear on the day of his party. Afton would be devastated by this, promising to put his son back together. He'd be furious at his business partner Henry because it was his engineering that did this to his boy. Then, one night, an opportunity presented itself. Charlie was locked outside by some bullies, and so Afton, in a fit of rage, killed Charlie. Unlike all the other killings that were premeditated, this was a crime of passion, and so it broke.
So it would kind of make sense if it went Golden Freddy, Puppet, Chica, Foxy, Bonnie, Freddy.
From all of his usual methods. And that allows this new order of deaths that Steel Wool has given us to make way more sense. Chica was always the first, but not just of the MCI, of all the deaths. That's why Henry made Security Puppet in the first place, because there were a bunch of kids disappearing from the pizzeria, and Henry wanted to protect his daughter.
Which brings us back to the beginning. Where did we land with the whole dual process theory? Did they solve FNAF? Is Cassidy the crying child?
I think the answer is yes, but also no. There are two two sides to this coin, right?
No,
Is
I don't
Crying
think it did.
Child the fifth missing kid that we've called Cassidy for all these years? I'm just not sure. It would simplify a lot, especially the FNAF 3 minigames where there's only 5 kids. But then we see a kid already dead inside the Golden Freddy suit before Crying Child even dies. And then there's the dozens of people that watch him die and flatline at the end of FNAF 4, which would make it hard for him to be considered missing, let alone considered one of the missing children specifically.
It's true. As much as I like it from a narrative standpoint, there's just as much evidence against it as it is supporting it. It's typical FNAF, you know?
Well, not completely, because there's the second side of this question. Sure, Crying Child might not be the 5th missing child, but based on what dual process theory presented, I think they might be right that Crying Child's name is Cassidy. William Afton, a deranged serial killer hiding in plain sight, until one day his son Michael decided to play a prank that would kill his youngest son, Cassidy Afton. It has a nice ring to it, I've got to admit.
Maybe, and I definitely see it. It's just a frustrating catch-22, you know? We either get to have the Crying Child's name, and in the process we lose the established 5th missing kid name, or Cassidy is the 5th missing kid, and Crying Child remains as nameless as he ever was.
I mean, the answer's got to be in here somewhere, surely. The altered text opposite the mirror returns the spirit's questions with, who are you? What's your name? And with Cassidy not being the 5th missing kid, that leaves the my name gravestone clue wide open. Honestly, my money's on the Foxy Grid. We never did solve it, and there's ghostly text written at the start. Maybe we should take another look.
Oh, no. There's no we here, my friend. I did my time with that Foxy Grid. This is all on you, man.
Oh, well then, I guess I better get started. It's not like I had a billion other FNAF things to worry about. Regardless, I suppose I should thank you for helping me out with this episode, Matt. I know Lawfi has kept you pretty busy.
Oh yeah, Lawfi. Nearly forgot that I was on here to promote that. Just got so caught up in the FNAF discussion. Anyway, I should probably get back to working on that. The team and I have worked really hard to make this project as great as it can be, and episode 1 just launched today here on YouTube. So if you're in need of some chill beats for studying, working, or sleeping, make sure you check out the Lawfi project over on Spotify. We've got new music releases dropping every week or so with clues hidden inside. So make sure you follow us there to listen as soon as they drop.
But if you want to level up your experience, you can always head on over to the YouTube channel and try to piece together the clues to help Taylor solve the mystery surrounding this definitely not a robot kid, Gregory. We've got new animations coming each month that are full to the brim with that sweet lore. You just couldn't help yourself, could you?
Hey, I'm retired. I don't get to say it that much anymore.
True. Do you know what else you don't get to say much anymore?
But hey, that's just a theory.
A game theory. Thanks for watching.
Oh, everyone. That's all. That's all 105 episodes. 103 episodes, right? Can't believe I sat there for 7 days watching all this. But now we're going on to Sarah's Missing. My Spotify open. We quickly pull that up. I can't believe I just spent all that time doing that. I'm not reacting again, by the way. Here it is. I have not opened this up yet. Still have to see. You forgot JT Live? Yeah, I didn't watch any of the GT Lives. I didn't watch any of those. I skipped them. Why is it not opening game? Here's. Ooh, Sim. I'm gonna increase the volume for you guys. I can't find my mouse. I'm gonna increase the volume for you guys because this game I think might be a little quiet. So let me mess with this one right here. I don't know. Yo, guys, let me know if this is too loud. I'm gonna set it to the normal sound, which would be we set the 0 decibels, which I have it negative. So let me know how this sounds. If it's too loud, let me know. Where's my mouse? I can't slide to unlock and I don't know where my mouse is. How do I swipe? I don't know where my mouse is. Hello? You guys can see my mouse, right? Yeah, you guys can see my mouse. I can't see my own mouse. That's weird. Let me open it up again. I don't know how to fix that. Mouse just disappears right here. Oh, because it's meant to be a mobile game, I think. Guys, I didn't I didn't know this was gonna be a problem. I have no access to my mouse. Hold up. Not receiving enough video to maintain stream. Don't make me restart. Hold up. Yeah, it's alright. Why can't I play it? Hello. I'm currently trying to figure out why I can't play this. Sarah is missing currently. So when I open it, it opens. But it says like you guys aren't getting a feedback. So I'm gonna have to restart my PC, restart stream, but I'll be up streaming again. Yeah, so I see Sarah's missing. I don't see my mouse anymore. I can click the X, but I can't swipe to unlock. The stream is so laggy for you guys. The X. Yeah, it's like really delayed. I'm gonna try two things. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to re-download this, I guess. Why is Sarah's missing still open? I'm gonna delete Sarah's missing, re-download it, and see if that helps. I want it for this. And if this doesn't work, I'm gonna restart my PC anyways because stream is lagging badly. So yeah. I'm gonna end this stream, start up a new one in a few minutes. Boom. Delete this. Again, just delete it. Thank you. Alright. Let's retry this. Will Sarah is missing work this time. Please work, please work, please work. Keep my mouse down here. Here we go. Hey! I still don't see my mouse. This is a failure. Yeah. Oh, crap. Crap. Lost my mouse. I can't see my mouse. I don't know where I'm clicking. It's not easy. My mouse is over there. Crap. Hey, I did it. Yay! Oh, this game's gonna be hard when I can't see my own mouse. This will restore your device. 52 minutes remaining. Whoa, yo, chill. Alright, stream is lagging really badly for you guys. That's terrifying. So, real quick, what I'm gonna do, I'm going to end this stream, and then I'm gonna start up a new one in a few, because I'm gonna restart my laptop. And then I'll be playing this again, so jump back. Change the name. Okay. So I'll see you guys in a few minutes. I'll be right back.